Okay, guys, very good morning to you all. Because of many technical problems, we faced one another. We decided to take a record of all my class lectures, then I'll share it with you. Live classes, we are having problems because of technicalities, connection problem, and even in your response and my discussion, time stops, gaps, there are problems. So let us record our lecture and I can share it with you. Day before yesterday, that is in our first class, we started the topic land reforms. Land reform measures. There are 4 measures which are constituted under land reforms. First measure is abolition of jomindari system that we discussed in my last class. Its criticism, achievement. Next measure of land reforms is tenancy reforms. Next measure is tenancy reforms. Under tenancy reforms, there are mostly 3 measures. One is regulation of rent, another is security of tenure, and third one, conferment of ownership rights, which is again constituted of 2-3 subsections like evictions of tenants, self-cultivation or personal cultivations, and maybe one more. I'll see that. Okay. Let us talk about little bit regulation of rent. And in case of tenancy reforms, you should know who are called tenants. According to the law or act, tenants are those persons who cultivate the land of others in exchange of payment of rent, either in cash or in kind or in both. With respect to that definition of tenants, the sharecroppers in West Bengal and Odisha and in UP, they are not termed as or recognized as tenant because the tenants or sharecroppers in West Bengal and UP, they share the crops. That is, they pay the rent by sharing the crops, say 50% or 40% or 30%, whatever the percentage may be, they share the crops. And because of that, they are not properly termed as tenant. That's why under the Act, they are also taken into account by incorporating them who pay the rent in the form of sharing the crops. Now, regulation of rents. When you talk about regulation of rent, what is this? Actually, rent to be paid by the tenants varied from state to state, within state, region to region, within a region maybe from one landlord to another landlord, and maybe from tenant to tenant. There is no fixed rate of rent. As a result, tenants were at the mercy of the landlords. Landlords could raise the rent at their will. That ultimately led to the impoverishment of the tenants. That is, it was difficult for the tenants to meet their both ends. It was very difficult. It was hard for them to arrange their food. That's why rents should be regulated depending on maybe the nature of land. If the quality of the land is good, irrigated, well irrigated, rent would be little high, and if it is dry land, it may be little less. And that way, all over India, depending on the regions, and irrigated, not irrigated land, rent were fixed. In Tamil Nadu, just let me show you. In Tamil Nadu, it was 40% for irrigated land, 35% for irrigation supplemented by lift water, lift irrigation, and 1/3 or 33.33% in some other case in Tamil Nadu. In Jammu and Kashmir, their rent was determined fixed depending on how much the landlord had. When the landlord had less than 12.5 acres of land, or the tenants holding less than 12.5 acres, and those who are hold more than 12.5 acres. For the lands holding less than 12.5 acres, rent should be 1/2 of the total produce, while for the higher amount of land, it was 1/4 of the total produce for wetlands and 1/3 for dry lands. And in case of other states, especially Andhra Pradesh, the fair rate was 30%, and that was 25% for dry land. In case of Odisha and Bengal, it was 25% or 1/4 of the produce. That means rent was fixed on an average 1/3 or 1/4. Okay, that is very essential measure with respect to the regulation of land. Unfortunately, what happened? Though rent has been fixed as 1/3 or 1/4 in different states, I can tell you in Odisha and in West Bengal, actually rent has been charged 50%, half of the produce to be paid as rent. Though officially it is 1/4 in West Bengal and Odisha. Next we talk about security of tenure. Security of tenure. What is this security of tenure? Security of tenure means the term or the number of years for which a tenant will cultivate the land. Right to cultivate the land of a tenant is for how many years? There was previously, before the law was passed, before the Land Reform Act was passed, there is no fixed security, meaning a landlord can give land for cultivation this year, next year maybe somebody else, and the following year maybe to some other persons. This kind of insecurity leads to very unfavorable condition of the tenant, and tenant cannot take interest to improve the land or to invest in the land to increase quality or fertility of the soil. They won't take interest because tenants know next year he may not get the land for cultivation. Why should he take interest for improvement of the soil, improvement of the land, property? They don't do. Then, not only that, insecurity keeps the productivity of the soil or productivity of the tenant very low. Even you know that if job is secure, then you don't have to think every day what will happen tomorrow or what will happen next month. Just you think about in this COVID situation, we the government employee getting salary from the government, our job is permanent, secure. So we are not that much anxious. We are not adversely affected as other private sector employees or workers who lost their jobs or who got their salary cut. They are going through a situation where they cannot maintain their family and therefore cannot give 100% to their field of production. Today we are readily accepting this digital way of teaching and we are coming forward. Yes, we have to do this. That means security of job or security of tenure gives a confidence through which productivity can be increased. But insecurity definitely reduces the productivity and does not help in improvement of quality of land. That's why term of tenure, a term of tenancy, or tenure of tenancy, that should be secure in the sense, it should be definitely secure in the sense, how many years? Permanent or not? So that's why tenure has to be secure on permanent basis. Meaning what? Meaning is that a landlord having land which the family cannot cultivate the land on their own labor, they give land to the tenants for cultivation and get the rent against it, through which they run their family. They are the feudal landlords. Now, this tenancy, meaning tenants, will be permanent. They will cultivate and their future generation also inherit the right to cultivation. It is not the right to ownership. Remember it. It is not the owner. Tenancy is permanent, does not mean a tenant becomes the owner of the land. Tenants have the right to cultivate the land against payment of rent. If the tenant fails to pay the rent, or if the landlord wants to cultivate the land with his own or family labor, then they can resume the land. Next part will come. that is called resumption of land for self-cultivation, resumption of land for personal cultivation. Then if tenure is secured by an agreement, next point is that does it not mean that Jamindar or landlords cannot take the land for own cultivation? Yes, they can take land. That's why there is a provision. There is a provision that if landlord can evict a tenant, if tenant fails to pay the rent, agreed amount, or if the landlord wants to cultivate the land on his own labor or family labor. That is called personal cultivation or self-cultivation on that ground. And that's why this self-cultivation or personal cultivation has to be defined very clearly. Otherwise, in different states, this self-cultivation or personal cultivation, it has been taken as a flea, and many Jamindars have evicted tenants and took the land. That is the, you can think about criticism about this eviction procedure. And here I like to talk about one thing more, that is called eviction. Here I can use one term. A tenant can be evicted only on the following grounds: failure to pay rent, failure to cultivate land, use of land rendering it unfit for cultivation, and area being held in excess of the permissible limit. In case a tenant is evicted, such land should be leased to other cultivating tenants. And resumption of self-cultivation, landowners can resume land for self-cultivation, but if there is an upper limit. Anyway, these are the measures. What are the criticism about this? Another point is that conferment of ownership rights. What is this? Different states have enacted legislations to enable tenant cultivators to become the owners of land, on which landowners cannot resume ownership. According to the Planning Commission's estimates, about 3 million tenants and sharecroppers have been able to acquire ownership of more than 7 million acres of land under this provision. There is conferment of ownership rights, meaning some sharecroppers, some tenants have been given the ownership right on the lands, and such figure is almost 3 million tenants and sharecroppers. They have been given ownership right of around 7 million acres of land. And another point, there is criticism, we can say that, as I told you already, the term self-definition, self-cultivation, it should be clearly defined. It is used as a vague, with the result that, according to Indian Planning Commission, in many cases, lands may have been resumed ostensibly on the grounds of personal cultivation. I told you many landlords have taken back the land from the tenants on personal cultivation ground, but actually they are cultivated through some arrangements lacking some elements of personal cultivation. You may talk about what is personal cultivation. I told you, no, right now, that personal cultivation means personal labor should be involved. Meaning your own labor, your family labor should be involved in the cultivation. If you cultivate by using hired labor, that is not personal cultivation. The term self-cultivation needs rigorous definition, and it is suggested that personal labor by the owner should be considered an essential element of self-cultivation. Another problem in the security of tenure is that quite often tenancy arrangement is made on an oral informal basis. Tenancy arrangement, whatever arrangement, you cultivate the land. There is no written arrangement, oral informal. Okay, Hajur, no problem. And that continues. And what is that happens? Ultimately, the landowners, they force the tenants through their social position, through their financial strength, power, through their political power, to which the poor tenants succumbed to, and ultimately they hand over, they voluntarily surrender their tenancy right. This is called, you can say, voluntary surrender. In the name of voluntary surrender, Jamindars, landlords take the land from the tenants. Okay. This is all about tenancy reforms. Next, we talk about ceiling on land holdings. Ceilings on land holdings. What is that? Ceiling on land holdings means, you just see, I'm just standing on a room. There is a floor, which is maybe called the lower limit, and there is a ceiling which may be termed as upper limit. So ceiling means upper limit on the holdings of land, meaning a landlord or owner of a land cannot hold as much as land he or she wants to hold. There must be a upper limit beyond which you cannot hold. That was the part of Land Reforms Act. And lands beyond ceiling levels are declared as surplus land by the government, and those surplus holdings are to be distributed among the landless laborers, small sharecroppers or tenants for their cultivation. So this is the ceiling, and what measures have been taken? Let's see. Objective of the ceiling on land holdings is to reduce the inequality. The objective of twofold: to reduce the size of land of big zamindars on the one hand, and increase the size of holdings of small cultivators. So, what is the aim or objectives of ceilings on land holdings? One, reduce the size of holdings of landowner. And another thing, giving this land to the small tenants or agricultural laborers, that will increase their size, or you can say reduce the inequality in the society. And criticism about this ceiling on land holdings. First, with respect to the unit of application. With respect to the unit of application, and what is the unit of application? When land holdings ceiling, the ceiling should be imposed with respect to a member of the family or the whole family. Initially, it was per member of the family. That is, if there are 10 members in the family, each member can hold, say suppose 5 acres or 10 acres. Then 10 members, 10 into 10, 100 acres of land is the upper limit. Okay. In that case, what is happening? The family, they are keeping the land even in the name of the distant family members, relatives, even in the name of maybe servants, maid servants, even in the name of cows, animals in the family. That happened. That is called Benami transfer. Benami transfer, meaning in the name of others who are not close members of the family. So if the members of the family are the reference point, then sealing laws fail. The sealing should be not per member of the family, it should be for family. One family means husband, wife, children, maybe grandfather, grandmother. Okay, this is the family. Mostly husband, wife, children. Maybe grandfather, grandfather, mother may be included. Let's see what is written here. If members of the unit that enable larger families to get away with larger amounts of land. On the recommendation of Central Land Reforms Committee 1971, the basis of fixation of ceiling has been adopted, not the members, and as the family as a unit, defined as existing of husband, wife, children, with a special provision for larger families having more than 5 children. So, husband, wife and children, and maximum larger family 5 children. What is the limit? Prior to 1972, level of the ceiling had wider range, but after 1972, the small ceilings, range of ceilings was fixed at 10 to 18 acres with assured water supply and yielding at least 2 crops. The acreage was adjusted in response to the irrigation. That means irrigated land a family can hold maximum 10 to, the range of limits was 10 to 18 acres, meaning with irrigation 10 acres, without irrigation 18 acres. Meaning 10 to 18 acres was the ceiling for a family of husband, wife and children. Not even father, mother. Husband, wife and children, family. Some relaxation for a larger family, and the limit was, ceiling was 10 to 18 acres depending on the irrigation facilities. Well irrigated land 10 acres. Okay. And yielding at least 2 crops. If the crops are 2 crops, then that limit should be within 10 to 18 acres depending on the size of the family. 10 to 18, remember it, 10 to 18 acres ceiling level depending on the size of the family. And of course, irrigated land yielding at least 2 crops. There are some exemptions. In the 1972 legislation, there were large number of exemptions which fell under following 3 categories. Transfer among family members, since the individual was in limit of application. Benami transfers, transfer for specific considerations, the area under plantation, orchards, water palms and so on. That means, although we are talking about a ceiling for a family, there are some exemptions. Exemptions were that transfer among the family members. Transfer of land among the family members. Since individual was a unit of previously, individual member was a unit of application. Later on, a family is a unit of application. When individual members were family of application, transfer would take place. Benami transfer, as I told you, in case of when individual members were applicable unit, they used to transfer the land in the name of cow, dog, and so on. Another exemption was like these tea garden areas, plantation areas, where they can keep land beyond the ceiling level. I think I should stop today this much. We can continue some other topic that is called consolidation of holdings, and next part is cooperative farming, confirmation of right, updating land records, next class. Thank you so much. Thank you for patient hearing. Thank you all.